We are ready to inform about the location of chemical weapons, halt the production of chemical weapons, and also show these objects to representatives of Russia, other states, and the United Nations. Our adherence to the Russian initiative has the goal of halting the possession of all chemical weapons.
It has to be swift, it has to be real, it has to be verifiable. It cannot be a delaying tactic, and if the United Nations Security Council seeks to be the vehicle to make it happen, that cannot be allowed to simply become a debating society.
Diplomacy is always a better outcome than military action. But I will say that I'm somewhat skeptical of those that are involved in the diplomatic discussion today.
The initiative from the Russians has done is said to has given the president a victory. There is a strong belief in our caucus that we should try everything first.
Charles.
If she imagines that this is a victory, she is delusional. The policy now is in total disarray. What happened yesterday was clear. The Russians were throwing Obama a lifeline because Kerry had made a gaffe. They gave an opening for Russia to look like the peacemaker. But as we talked about last night, their single objective is to make sure that Assad wins the civil war. That's their interest. They have no interest in chemical weapons one way or the other. They have a base there. This is the Iran-Hezbollah Syria axis. It dominates the Middle East. The Russians are behind it. They supplant America as the dominant actor in the region, first time since 1970. So what was offered yesterday, we'll deal with the chemicals, but you're going to have to deal with Assad. If there's going to be inspection, you have to do it with Assad. To recognize Assad, you have to go under the protection of his military. You're going to have to obviously tell the rebels to stand down. And now, Putin isn't even stealthy about it. He said openly today that if there's going to be anything about chemical weapons, the United States has to openly say it will not use military force.
He said that about 3 p.m. And
that,
you can hear the drafting of that speech changing.
That was the key. Anybody who was naive enough to imagine that this was a sincere offer, to quote Hillary Clinton yesterday, this is the objective: no American action, a promise and a pledge, so that Assad and his side wins. This is what this is. There's no way the chemicals are going to be dismantled in the middle of a war. Libya took 8 years when there was no war. So this is obvious. And the Russians today demanded a meeting of the Security Council, and they wanted what? A presidential statement from the Council, which is absolutely useless. It carries no import, and they don't want a resolution that the French are introducing, which would be Article 7, which would mean the use of force. So their strategy is clear. Obama has walked completely into it, and he's got nowhere to go now.
It's hard not to laugh at this, but this has now been reduced almost to the level of entertainment.
He's going to speak to a nation that has no intention of striking and announce that he's going to have a pause in striking.
Well, but it's preposterous. I mean, you had the president's advisors saying we wouldn't strike without the assent of Congress. Everybody in the entire country, everybody in Damascus, everybody in Russia knew that Congress was going to vote this down. And John Kerry said it was unbelievably small. Yeah. How in the world can anybody argue that that's a credible threat of the use of military? It's not. It never was.
Well, he wasn't going to do it without this.
But you could as easily argue that Lindsey Graham and John McCain were responsible for it.
Unless there had been some threat.
The reason that the Russians acted is not the fear of a strike, which is going to be unbelievably small and wouldn't have happened in the first place. It was because of the opportunity to lead Obama, who was way out on a limb, into a cul-de-sac where Obama now is, where his only alternative is to ensure that Assad remains in power, or to do something that would be incredibly unpopular, probably unconstitutional, and that he doesn't want to do in the first place.
He could turn over every single bit of his chemical weapons to the international community in the next week. Turn it over, all of it, without delay, and allow a full and total accounting for that. But he isn't about to do it, and it can't be done, obviously. We're waiting for that proposal, but we're not waiting for long. President Obama will take a hard look at it.
Why are we waiting at all? Kerry's the one who supposedly is the one who proposed it first. The response from the Russians came afterwards. As I heard it, it was an American proposal. And the way he said it, it meant this week, immediately. So why are we waiting? If this really is what Obama had spoken with Putin about, which of course I don't believe for a second, when he was at the G20, assume that is true, then why didn't Obama seize the moment and say, this is an American proposal, we're glad the Russians agree, or at least in principle, and here's what the proposal is. You got a week, we are not going to wait, we're going to have a resolution that will pass in the Security Council by Friday, and then we will send inspectors by Monday. That's the American proposal.
I mean, Brett,
so why are we sitting around and waiting for the Russian proposal that we know is going to be a meaningless one?
just down the road here, what's he going to say? What can he say? What will he say?
I suspect there's going to be another twist here, because not once has he spoken in a way that anybody expected. He's in a cul-de-sac. I don't know which way he goes, but if he gets up there and calls for a pause for something that the country doesn't want to do, he will be a laughingstock. The future of the world hinges on an extremely small strike that may not happen at all.
This has been a Sunfish production.